Fantastic. Plenty of news and events to cover from this week. This week on the weekly, we'll be talking about the highest ever quarterly exports that we've had at $95 billion. UPI transactions reaching $2.8 billion. And man, it's raining down all of these numbers and figures, right? So IPOs this year being the best ever at 27,000 crores. And then 100 years of former Prime Minister PV Narasimha Rao. Some of the new measures announced by Finance Ministry, and of course, to round it off, a stellar performance by Indian archers at the World Archery Championship. So, yeah, we have an action-packed weekly lined up for you. Before that, let's talk a little bit about the episode that we put out last week. Um, I had a very nice, comprehensive discussion on the state of Jammu and Kashmir with Dr. Kaul and Sri Virinder Kaul, right? Both of them are activists from the global Kashmiri diaspora, and they've been invested in this for the last 20, 30 years of their life. And, we all hear about the atrocities that happened, the tragedy that happened with the Kashmiri Pandits leaving India in the exodus in 89, 90 and so on, right? And what has happened to the state after that. But this was a first-hand view of everything that's happened, and the sheer tragedy and the things that have happened to them and how they're coping, how they're keeping their community alive in this through all of these years. And the great thing was, they seemed very optimistic for what has happened over the last couple of years, especially with the abrogation of Article 370A. And going forward politically, things like the delimitation, for example, will give more rights to Kashmiri Pandits for sure. So fantastic episode. Definitely check it out. It should be part of your listening. So yeah, with that out of the way, so India reached its highest ever quarterly exports with $95 billion worth of products being exported. Exports in India increased to 32460 USD million in June from 32270 USD million in the month of May. This growth can be attributed to healthy growth in engineering, rice, oil meals, and marine products, as well as other sectors. Main exports include precious and semi-precious stones, mineral fuels, vehicles and accessories, pharmaceutical products, and so on. India's main export partners include the United States, UAE, Hong Kong, China, and Singapore. Union Minister Piyush Goyal said it was the highest ever merchandise exports in a quarter in the history of the nation. India's trade deficit stood at $9.4 billion last month. So, Abhishek, are we seeing some sort of a resurgence of the Indian export market?
Thanks, Shari. So, yeah, if we take a step back and look at the numbers first for the last financial year, India's merchandise exports were down about 7%, right, due to the pandemic, and finished the year at about $291 billion. And the services exports were down by around 4% at around $205 billion. So now, interestingly, India's current account, which is and balance of payments, which is also being talked about in the media, the first time we had a surplus of 0.9% of the GDP, right, in 17 years. As the trade deficit narrowed due to the contraction due to pandemic-related, demand contraction. Coming back to the topic, right, exports. Despite the pandemic, by around December 2020, the Indian merchandise exports were back to about the 1 year back levels, and things have been steadily ticking up since then. So the number that you mentioned, $95 billion, is the merchandise exports part of it, right? This is a 85% jump year over year. Of course, last year's numbers are adversely impacted due to the start of the pandemic. So if we compare with FY19 Q1, right, with the numbers are about 17% higher. And as you said, this is the highest ever quarter, surpassing Q4 of FY21, which did 90 billion, right? So the another number that is being talked about is that we have done now 4 straight months of $30 billion plus exports, right? Which is also first time that we have had such a consistent, numbers coming up on that front. for the full fiscal year, right? From April 21 to March 22, the target is $400 billion, and we have done 95 in the first quarter. So it's a good start towards that. As you said, some of the sectors doing well are, engineering goods, rice, spice and oil mills, marine products. But also, I think we are doing well on the labor-intensive sectors. In terms of services, the data does come in a little lower, but the first 2 months data seems to indicate we were doing about 6% year over year growth. So we are back on growth on that side as well. And some of the steps which the government has taken, which has helped in the recent times, include, simplification of processes, extension of timelines and licenses. So the compliance front has sort of been helped out for the exporters by the government. And also they have been working to clear the dues pending to exporters in an expeditious manner. But broadly, if you look at the macro picture, some of the things helping in bringing back demand are, increased vaccination, lower number of cases, especially in the developed world, right? Also, supply chains are functioning better. I mean, we saw freight charges, etc., go up significantly last year, but I think suppliers have now renegotiated rates with end customers, and so things have kind of smoothened in that manner. So overall, things looking up on the export front. Let's see how the next quarter goes.
Fantastic. Always good to start with a dose of optimism. So, in more optimism, UPI has set a new record with 2.8 billion transactions in June. This is also a record for the highest transaction volume and value. The collective value of the transactions is around 5,47,303 crore. This is a 10.6% jump in volume and a 11.56% jump in value as compared to May of this year. The UPI ecosystem is primarily dominated by three players: PhonePe, Google Pay, and Paytm. As of May, PhonePe had 45.27% market share, followed by Google Pay and Paytm with 34.67% and 11.44% market share, respectively. Shivatsa, it's almost like, every few months we discuss UPI transactions hitting a new high, right? And we did this recent episode on digital payments, and I mean we did an older one with Nikhil and Deepak on the value of UPI and the potential for the future. All of those seem to be like gaining momentum.
Yeah, I mean, UPI has been, I think, a game changer when it comes to payments in India. UPI is not exactly new. I mean, it was started a few months before demonetization, so it's a 5-year-old product. It's taken a while to kind of grow, but once it started growing post demonetization, there's literally been no stopping it. Uh, we hit 1 billion transactions a month in October 2019. That was also the time UPI hit 100 million users. So it took about 3.5 years to get to 100 million users. If you look at any social media product today, I don't think they would have, reached 100 million users faster than UPI. So that's been the scale of growth and the rate at which it has, become popular. Regulators had their part to play. They doubled the transaction limits from 1 lakh to 2 lakh. 1 lakh was the limit for IMPS. They doubled it to 2 lakhs. IMPS is basically the technology behind UPI. In the next 1 year, it doubled again to October 2020. Uh, and it was again fueled primarily by festive shopping, recovery after the first COVID wave, and so on. This year, actually, during the second wave, the volumes had fallen from around 2.7 billion in March to 2.5 billion in June. There were two consecutive months of drops, but again, with the economy recovering, it kind of showed that it was not driven by anything else other than pure economic factors. So the adoption is going. It's now hit 2.8 billion. The beauty of UPI, I think, as we've covered both in the initial episode with Nikhil and Deepak, and then with Monica and Ritu, was the ease of use. And one of the other reasons is that it's very cheap and it's instant, right? But that has kind of brought its own share of issues. The failure rates in UPI are among the highest. there is a need to make UPI more worthwhile for banks to invest in infrastructure. They should be able to make money, some money out of UPI, so that they can continue to invest and support this growth. Right. Otherwise, if people start seeing a lot of failure in UPI transactions, there is a good chance that they'll switch to other ways of payments, even though it costs money. Or the worst case situation is they'll probably switch to cash, which will take away a lot of effort that has been put in to move people to digital banking. UPI is it's something that actually India can export to the world. For a long time, we've heard of India just being, a services shop when it comes to technology. But I think with things like the Jam Trinity, UPI, there is a good opportunity for India to export foundational technology for a country to other countries that
Yeah.
that need to move, quickly on the digitization path.
Yeah, absolutely. I think not just the fact that it's leagues ahead, right? I think this kind of a framework can be replicated on multiple different axes, right? For instance, the health sector and so on and so forth, right? All right, continuing with the optimism, the half yearly report card for IPOs is out, and we have raised something like 27,000 crores for half the year. A total of 23 companies came out with their IPOs and also got listed during the first 6 months of 2021. These 23 companies raised a total sum of 33,166 crore between them. Sorry, I got that number wrong. A total of 17 of these 23 IPOs happened in the May 21 quarter. There was a virtual drought of IPOs for 75 days between end March and mid June due to the new merchant banking norms proposed by SEBI. We're yet to see the big bang IPOs like the multi-billion dollar IPOs of Paytm and LIC expected to happen this year. However, experts hope that 2021 could be an all-time record year for IPOs in India. So, Abhishek, what do you think about this? And more importantly, how many allocations did you get?
So yeah, as you said, I mean, the first half has been one of the best, if not the best, right? So we did about 27,000 plus crores. I think 2018 was about 23,000 plus, right? So really strong first half. There is an abundance of liquidity as well as strong investor enthusiasm that is driving this. And as you said, the second half looks big, right? So apart from the companies you mentioned, there is talk of Zomato, Aditya Birla, Sun Life, AMC, and so on, right? So the number for H2 of calendar year 21 could be more than 40,000 crores, right? So that's a big number. And as you said, last year was very lackluster around this time with just one single IPO of SBI cards, right, due to the COVID outbreak. So far this year, some of the notable ones are like MTAR Technologies, Nazara Technologies, Shyam Metallics, Easy Trip. So these ones were among the highest over subscriptions, right? So including more than 100 times. I mean, it was about 139 times for MTAR, right? So really strong enthusiasm. Size wise, you had Sona Comstar at 5,000 crores plus, Indian Railways Finance Corporation 4,000 crores plus, and so on. So, there is a lot of liquidity out there which is chasing the primary markets. And the trend that is sort of continuing for the last few years is that IPOs have now become a big vehicle for existing PE funds or VC funds or shareholders and existing shareholders and promoters to seek a very good exit, right? And if you look at the offer of for sale part of the IPOs, right, which is the ones where the existing shareholders, whether it is VC or promoters, etc., how much they are going out. So that's about 62% for the IPO number, while about 37% was for pure, fresh capital generation. And this is a trend that has been going on for some times. In fact, last 2 years, the trend was more than 70% if you look at the comparatives. Now, this a good thing or bad? I don't know. It's a debatable point, right? People will say that you need to be pretty selective because if for example, the valuations are already peaking, then there may not be a lot of money to be made for investors. But at the same time, uh, these this sort of moment in the market is bringing fast growth or high growth companies for the investors, public, to sort of partake in that growth. So it can work out both ways. But in general, the favorable market conditions are expected to sort of continue, I think. And I mean, one interesting thing that all of us would have seen is, with a lot of people working from home, I think the general sort of small investor participation seems to have increased in this work from home conditions, where people have bit more time on their hands, right? And the stock market seems to be sort of attracting that kind of new or casual investor as well.
I think you
Yeah.
should add a disclaimer there saying that this is not to be taken as investment advice.
Yes, of
Of
course.
course. Yeah. We did a couple of episodes. I remember, I think we did a Long India episode with Miss Radhika Gupta, right, where she covered plenty of these aspects. And then we did one with Govind and
Yeah.
Mr. Ashish Somaya as well on the market specifically. Do check out these episodes. They tell you what's happening from a market's perspective, right? Moving on. So, PV Narasimha Rao's birth centenary, of course, the former Prime Minister's birth centenary, will be celebrated in a grand manner across Telangana. The Telangana Chief Minister, Shri K. Chandrasekhar Rao, announced that the former Prime Minister PV Narasimha Rao's birth centenary celebrations would be organized for 1 year. PVNR was known as was not just a Prime Minister; he was a freedom fighter, educationist, and a literary figure. He also served as Minister of External Affairs and Home Minister for India during the time. Uh, During his time in the Ministry of External Affairs, he strengthened Indian relations with countries like USSR, Bangladesh, Iran, and more. Srivatsa, we often feel like he wasn't really given his due, right? And especially the way his party treated him in his later years, right? So, your thoughts?
Absolutely. See, PV Narasimha Rao is a very old school politician. He was one of those freedom fighters who ended up in politics. His first stint as in a leadership role as chief minister of the then undivided Andhra Pradesh was not very good. But however, he became one of India's greatest prime ministers. Uh, in fact, he's the first prime minister who's not from the Nehru Gandhi family to have actually completed a full term. So he holds that distinction as well. Uh, PV Narasimha Rao was not just a politician, right? He was a literator of sorts. He was a polyglot who, as we are reminded constantly by our friends from Pune, studied in Pune, and he actually translated some of the famous Marathi books into Telugu. He also translated books from other languages such as Hindi into Telugu. So he was pretty much an old school politician, unlike today's politics, which is mostly bipartisan, and you almost never acknowledge the opposite side. PV Narasimha Rao was different, both in Andhra Pradesh and at the center. He sent the then opposition leader, Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, to the UN to represent India's side, right? And that was one of the most, I think, bipartisan decisions that a prime minister has ever made in India. Uh, when it came to economic reforms, he stood by a rock with Manmohan Singh. There was a lot of criticism at that time. There were threats of strikes, bunds. He withstood all of that and put India on the path to economic reform. I doubt, the finance minister would have been able to achieve as much without the support of PV Narasimha Rao. He also changed a lot of India's foreign policy, right? He reached out to Israel. The roots of India's strong relations with Israel were pretty much laid by him. He started what was famously known as the Look East policy, and today some of India's largest trading partners are from Southeast Asia. Uh, he was also pretty firm, even though people thought that he was a weak prime minister. But he stood up to the US. He never gave up India's nuclear independence. Although there was a nuclear test that he tried, but he ended up backing off because the US came to know about it. But all in all, there were a lot of achievements for India during his term as a prime minister, be it foreign policy, be it economics, the economy, or be it defense as well. He was a lifelong learner. Not many people know that he actually learned how to program in his 60s. And his doctor suggested some exercises as he was getting old, to counter arthritis. He didn't do those exercises. He used that time to actually type on the keyboard and write more. So that in essence was PV Narasimha Rao. He was self-called lifelong learner, polyglot, uh, and you would almost call him an accidental politician, mostly because of his background in freedom struggle.
Right. Um, Moving on, Finance Minister Shri Nirmala Sitharamanji announced 8 relief measures to combat COVID-19. She stated that one item on the list was related to health infrastructure, especially in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. This measure guarantees 75% coverage for new projects and 50% coverage for expansion projects over 3 years. There's also been another set of 8 items pertaining to growth, exports, and employees, of which 6 are new. Some other relief measures announced include an extension on the Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme, a new credit guarantee scheme launched to provide loans to small borrowers, and a scheme to revive tourism and more. So, Abhishek, I know you had a slide prepared for this. Can you take us through some of these new measures and what impact they might have?
Sure, Gary. So the headline number that is being talked about in the media is 6,29,000 crores, and there are a total of 17 measures in that, right? Now, these measures can be broadly clubbed into three broad categories. Firstly, economic relief. Second is public health, and third is impetus for growth and employment. Right. So, if you look at the first part of it, that's where a chunk of the value is about 376 uh, lakh crores are for this, and the major ones include a loan guarantee scheme for COVID affected. So, and finally, about 93,000 crores are for the free food grain, which the PM had announced, right, in his address to the nation, which is under the PMGKY scheme, right? So that sort of takes the first part of it, right? And then you have public health related 15,000 crores. That is for mainly for children related and pediatric related healthcare. And finally, the last category is for 237,000 crores for growth and employment. The major one in this is basically the power sector related reforms. So let me talk about a couple of these schemes in a bit of details. So as we all know, the tourism sector is really badly impacted, right? So one of the relief measures is sort of targeted heavily towards this sector. So in India, we have about 11,000 registered tourist guides and so on, right? So under the loan guarantee scheme, they will be able to get working capital and personal loans with sort of much more ease, and they will get so the sort of tourism and travel stakeholders, as they are called, TTS, can get loans up to 10 lakhs, while sort of tourist guides, individuals, can get loans up to 1 lakh. And then there are some other benefits, right? So they can avail this with no processing charges. There's a waiver for foreclosure and prepayment charges and so on. Another scheme for this tourism sector is, the first 5 lakh tourist visas will be issued free of charge. So I think it's good that the government is sort of looking at this sector. I mean, the hospitality industry in general really sort of needs our help at this moment. The other one under the impetus for growth and employment pillar that I would like to just touch upon is the sort of reforms related to the discoms, right? So The number here is 97,631 crores, which is center's contribution. The overall project here is about 3,03,000 crores. And this is spread till 2025-26 year, right? So what is this all about? This scheme is to provide financial assistance to discoms for infrastructure creation, upgradation of their systems, and so on. And this is sort of trying to remove a one size fits all approach and have state specific interventions. And I think there are pretty clear pre-qualification criteria which have been published to the states. And once the states are able to comply with these criteria and meet the conditions, they will be able to get these, reforms and support from the central government in place. Basically, what is also happening is that there are a number of current schemes, right, like the Saubhagya scheme or the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Yojana. So all these are getting merged into this revamped program, right? And in addition, I think the states have already been allowed to additionally borrow up to 0.5% of their state domestic product, and that will also continue. So all that is subject to states following and achieving the targets laid under this program, and then the reforms can continue under this pillar.
Right. Fantastic. Overall, I think the theme of this weekly is fairly optimistic. Right. And in more good news, Deepika Kumari has bagged gold at the World Archery Cup, taking her to the #1 spot in the world. She has regained the #1 position after her hat trick of medals at stage 3. She claimed medals in 3 recurve events: women's individual, team, and mixed pair. She's only the second Indian woman after Dola Banerjee to grab the #1 status in June. She will be the only Indian woman archer to represent the country at the Tokyo Olympics next month. What's up? Pretty exciting news from the world of sports.
Absolutely. I think the thing with archery is a fairly recent sport in India, right? I mean, it came to India only in the 70s. Uh, though we have a long history of archery, at least in terms of itihasa and so on, but it has been a fairly neglected sport. So in that sense, people have had to work hard and come up on their own. It was only recently that the Modi government has put archery as one of the top 6 priority sports, obviously outside of cricket, which pretty much runs on its own. Uh, and another thing with archery is that there has never been a hero as such, right? So, for instance, when it came to shooting, you had Rajyavardhan Singh Rathod who won the silver, and then immediately in the next Olympics, you had Abhinav Bindra who won gold. And there are clear role models and heroes when it comes to shooting today, which is why we continue to see good performances. They may not be winning Olympic golds and so on, but Indian shooting is considered to be of a fairly high standard globally. And I think Deepika Kumari can probably play that same role when it comes to archery. We've had successful archers like Limba Ram in the past, but they've not been able to win medals at the Olympic level, right? And Deepika Kumari has been pretty much a phenomenon in the sense that she won 3 golds in this World Cup, and overall she's won more than 25 medals in World Cups, right? Which puts her in a pretty elite league. In this World Cup itself, she won a team event, then won another event with her husband Atanu Das, and then won an individual gold as well. Not just that, in addition, so as part of Deepika's team, you had Ankita Bhakat and Komalika Bari. So they won the women's team event. In addition, Abhishek Verma also clinched gold in the compound section. So all in all, I think it's been a great performance by the Indian archers, and possibly with more support coming in for the sport, uh, and hopefully we win something in the Olympics. I think the sport itself has a great future ahead in India.
Fantastic. All right. That's a wrap from us here at the weekly. But before we leave, a few announcements. So upcoming on Bharatvaarta, we have a couple of episodes, more than a couple, in fact, right? So we have a premium subscriber only episode on Ayodhya, where Vivek Khaitan, who's a history enthusiast, will be taking you through the significance and the road ahead with Ayodhya itself. And then I will be talking to Sri N.K. Chaudhary the following week. Of course, he's an industry legend, and we'll be talking to him about how he's taking Indian arts and artisans to the world, right? And also, we're on Patreon, right? So that's another channel for all of you to support us on. Do definitely join our community. And from the 51st weekly onwards, the Bharatvaarta Weekly will be premium only. We hope that all of you join us on that, on the journey ahead. So otherwise, that's a wrap from us. Thank you so much again for joining us on this very lovely Sunday morning. Hope you're having a great time. And from Abhishek, Vatsa, and myself, see you next time. Take care. Bye.